Welcome back to Money 911, where health, wealth, and peace of mind come together to transform your lives. I'm your host, Kris Miller, and today we're unlocking the kind of power that changes everything. What if you could remember anything? What if you could train your brain to work for your business, your dreams, and your destiny? My guest today is a walking miracle of memory. He's a two-time Guinness World Record holder for the greatest memory, a master of media, and a proven entrepreneur who built a global brand using nothing but his brain power and heart. Please help me welcome the phenomenal Dave Farrow, CEO, PR strategist, and creator of the Farrow Method, a science-backed system that's helped thousands supercharge their minds and their lives. Get ready, friends. This episode might just rewire how you think about thinking. Dave, it's so fabulous to have you and see you again. Thank you so much for joining me.
That's awesome. You're one of my favorite people. One of my favorite clients in the past and today. Yeah, was looking forward to this call. We're gonna go through a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to acknowledge you did get us on Oprah Magazine, and you really are brilliant at what you do, let alone all the memory thing, Guinness Book of Records, and I'm watching my memory,
I've got a good team that makes me look good. That's for sure. They're very good at getting experts like you publicity, and my contribution. I try to make it using memory techniques, and we call it memorable marketing. So a combination of that.
We need that. That's really good. Most people try to remember more by working harder or repeating things, but what's one myth that you would love to bust about memory?
Oh, about memory, I would have to say that you're not born with it. You're not born with a good or bad memory. It is something that you can train.
Mm.
In fact, your brain is it's very well established that your brain does change itself depending on what your habits are. So it's probably the one area of your life that's most susceptible to your habits, whether it be a great example is like negative or positive thinking. If you are thinking negatively for a long time, then you train your brain to think negatively, and that is really hard to change that. Same with positive thinking. There's just thousands of examples of this. So I would have to say, get rid of the idea that you're born a certain way and you can't adjust it. Your brain can change, and even things like IQ now are more permeable than people think.
That's great. There's so much distraction and so easy to just go off on all these different rabbit holes. So how does someone train their brain to stay sharp and on point?
Absolutely. Well, you hit the nail on the head with the distraction. Distraction is the thing that destroys our focus, and I had some times post COVID myself. I talk about this, on my YouTube channel that I was the most forgetful person you could imagine, and it was, all of my techniques were great when you use them. But, when you get distracted, when you get overwhelmed, when you get emotional, I was dealing with grief. I won't go too far into it, but I was dealing with a lot of stuff that when you're in that situation, your brain gets hijacked. But it gets hijacked for a reason. It's not, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a terrible person. Your brain is trying to focus on what it thinks is important. So let's just take the average person who gets stressed out because rent is due, right? What your brain thinks is going on is that your life is in danger because you're scared. And that fear triggers your amygdala, it triggers cortisol, it triggers a bunch of things in your body, and essentially prepares your body for a potential fight or a conflict because that's what we did for most of our evolution. The problem is we're not going to be wrestling any bears anytime soon, so we just walk around the house ready to wrestle a bear or whatever it is. We're ready for a conflict, and we're pumping all these chemicals into our brain. Our brain is doing it for us. I'm not talking about processed foods or anything. That's another story. But we're pumping these chemicals. Our brain is pumping into these fear toxins and chemicals, and it's making us scared, but it's also making us dumb. One of the biggest things that I would say right now, if you want to train your brain, is to try to challenge your stress and try to let go of negativity, let go of stress, because it is not helping you. You think that it protects you, you think it guards you from danger, and nothing could be further from the truth. We know from studies that it distracts, that hypervigilance actually makes you worse at detecting problems. There's all sorts of data on this, but it's also common sense. If you've ever found a time when you're super frazzled, super overwhelmed, your brain is not at its best. Those are also the times where you think that you're being hyper vigilant. You're focusing really hard. You're being really aware of scary things that are happening, but your brain just thinks that you're ready to fight a bear, so it makes you dumber. It pulls back on your intelligence. It pulls back on your, like, it saves resources for other areas. We know this when fight or flight kicks in, that more blood flows to your muscles, less oxygen to your brain. You you become dumber. But the other side is also true. You can trigger a state where you're at your best. If you've ever had that flow state where you're like ideas are flowing and things are going and moving, you can trigger that hyper focus flow state, and then you're temporarily smarter than you usually would be. And that's, of course, where we want to be when we're making decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you've literally turned memory into a movement and built an empire, for yourself and your
Well, I don't know
brain.
about that. I think I'm just trying to help some people. This stuff worked for me. It changed my life. So I just kind of followed the philosophy that if it worked for me, then other people might benefit from it.
Yeah, and that's really the true wealth, honestly. The heart
Mhm.
connection is the real deal. But what I found in, 35 years in my practice, and why I call it money 911, is there's so many hacks that aren't even conscious in people's brains around year 25. I was going along going, you know what? I'm coaching people more on their mindset around the money than actually doing applications. How do you use your brain hacker on all this money madness?
Oh yeah, no, probably one of the biggest brain hacks around money is to get used to the idea of being patient.
Mm,
Most of people's mistakes around money, psychological mistakes, I will say. I'm not going to judge, like, we're not going to get into every possible. Money is a big topic, right? You can talk about
yeah.
stocks or real estate or investments, but I'm talking about, like, day-to-day finances. The biggest mistake the average person makes is a lack of patience and thinking that they have to do something right away. I mean, every financial scammer, the first thing they do is they rush you. They give you a sense of urgency, like,
Yeah.
oh, we have to have it in the bank account before the bank closes today, at 4 o'clock. And the reason is that we have to make you do something before you get a chance to think twice about it. And how many times have you regretted that? So slow down. Don't rush when it comes to financial decisions. Don't think that, and don't let anybody else rush you. I'm speaking as a person who's in sales, and I do marketing for a living, and I'm telling people one of the first things you do is try to get a sense of urgency. I mean, of course, we have to run a business. People don't act unless there's urgency. But if you want to be a smart consumer, slow down that urgency. Find out, do I really want this? How badly do I want this? Will it still be there tomorrow? Can I sleep on it? That's probably going to save you on a lot of your bad decisions, purchase decisions. But it's also really good advice for making income. How many people, they rush into a position or a job, or even, when they're going to college and they pick their major or something, they rush into it, or do, succumb to pressure of what other people think. And you talk to these people years later and they like, I wish I would have thought more about that decision. That's like one decision that changes your entire life, like, tremendously. And you kind of get rushed into it or pushed into it. And you got to, think for yourself. Don't be afraid to say no.
That's great. That it seems so simple, but it's really missed. And
It's easy to say, hard to do, for
yeah,
for myself included. But
yeah,
you can still, it doesn't make it any less of the truth.
because the world just stays in this urgency, and tomorrow's the end, and end of this and end of that, and right.
Yeah, one of the biggest things right now is the buy now, pay later ones. This is another
Oh,
psychological thing we've seen with,
yeah.
I won't say any of the company names. I don't want to advertise for them, but you buy something on Amazon or you
Right.
buy something through an online checkout. You can do buy now, pay later for DoorDash, and you can put a
Yeah.
burrito on layaway. Think about that. Like,
That's
instead
bad.
of paying $20 now, you can pay 390, five installments of 395. And it's just, I saw a video about that,
Oh,
so much respect to that. But
yeah.
um, that is taking advantage of that psychological condition of, like, it's a different one than urgency, but it is something that, you have to decide right in this checkout, and you could have that FOMO of not making that decision. But it also is watch out for people using psychological tactics on you. One of the other ones is the idea of putting off pain. We all want to put off pain and have
Mm-hmm.
pleasure now. So
Yes.
that's where we get into debt, right? Is
Right.
is we're only have to worry about those payments later on. And right now the buy now pay later stuff is so insidious because it's such a small amount. Nobody thinks, "Oh yeah, I'll get charged $5 a month for the next, 46 months or something stupid like that," right? It's
Right.
only $5, right? But that
Right.
only $5 turns into 10, 20, 50, 100, and then all of a sudden, you have those situations where you're like, how many things are you signed up for? I'm paying $300 a month
Exactly.
on stuff I don't even use anymore. Yeah, and that's how they get you.
Exactly. It really is sad because 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Even if you make 100,000 used to be decent, but that's
Most people
nothing.
are making minimum payments on their debts, and yeah, so it's
Right.
it's and they want you to be rushed, so you don't
Mhm.
think twice and think ahead. They want you
Right.
to be rushed, they want you to be stressed, because that makes you most susceptible to
Exactly.
psychological tactics. Now, I want to make it clear the type of marketing we try to do is we use psychological tactics to promote businesses that are valid. I want to say we're not. I don't believe we're part of the problem. I think we're part of the solution. There's a lot of small businesses out there that do not get their day in the sun. They do not get exposure, and they're damn good at what they do. So we use all the psychological tactics to help elevate them to try to compete against the big guys. We're not trying to make Amazon another $1 billion. We're trying to help this little guy. So I hope that puts us, in the saint category, or at least not as much of a sinner.
Yeah, right. No, I mean you've got the heart there. That's why I worked with you because you
Mhm.
got the heart there inside of the business part of it. And you've said before memory is about emotional story, not so much repetition.
Mhm.
Explain, the emotion plays in the remembering and why is that so popular?
Well, the nature of memory is that the thing that people don't understand. And it's only recently that neuroscience, I would say, has even caught up to this. But mnemonic experts have been doing this for thousands of years. That's why they've been able to, like me, I got in the Guinness Book of Records from memory. That was my trick. But there's been people for thousands of years that have done memory demonstrations. And the main secret behind it is a philosophy that your brain actually makes a decision to remember something long term. It's not an accident. And there are certain criteria that your brain says, oh, that information is important. I'm going to hold on to it. So the main principle that your brain really holds on to is novelty, and how it judges importance is based on something extreme. So this is the principle I call the tiger in the jungle. This is my analogy. Whereas, so imagine that you're walking through a jungle, and you see a tree, and you see a rock, and you see a beautiful stream, and you see a squirrel, and you see a tiger, and then you see another tree, and then you see a rock, and you're eaten by the tiger because you didn't pay enough attention to the damn tiger. Okay. So the ones who were not eaten by the tiger were the ones who noticed it first. And that's what your brain does. Your brain is like, oh, I'm going to ignore that, ignore that, ignore that. Oh, that could be danger. And I'm going to ignore this, ignore this, ignore that. And so that's how your brain treats information, is it skims through everything that you encounter and tries to figure out what is danger, what is important. So the modern version of this, because we do ideally, we're not walking in places where tigers are going to eat us anymore, and is your brain tries to figure out what is important. But the interesting thing is your brain, how what it thinks is important is often different from what is actually important. Like to us, what's actually important are the boring things, like someone's name, or understanding like an interest rate. Well, marketers and others try to bury those things so that you don't see them, but they know that our primitive brain pays attention to all the shiny stuff. That's the
Right.
tiger, the glittery stuff, the big headlines and everything. So essentially, what you want to understand in marketing is there is going to be an appeal to emotion, but really what it is they're trying to stand out in the marketplace. They're trying to be that tiger amongst a bunch of trees and rocks and everything. And they're going, no, we're different. And in some cases, that's authentic. So in some cases, they invented something, or they are masters of their crafts, and I believe we are masters of our craft. But in other cases, it's just hype. And they're just like, buy this because we're better, we're cooler, we're different. And they're just trying to be that thing that triggers your brain. But really what it is, it's not a matter of don't always think of it like emotion because there's lots of things that trigger our emotion that we don't want to buy, right?
Mm.
Think of it more like what stands out. So if I had a row of apples in front of me, like 20 apples, and all of them were red apples, but I had one, Granny Smith,
Mm.
green apple in it, everybody would look at the green apple first. It's the thing that stands out. That is really
Yeah.
the fundamental principle for your brain. And that's what everybody's trying to do. So when you have a marketplace where everyone's trying to stand out, that's why it's so noisy and obnoxious and weird and cringe and all these, and they try all these different things and they fail so many times. But that's really what they're trying to do is they're trying to stand out and trigger essentially what is your survival mechanism when you look through a jungle or look through a field and your brain is tuned to see a predator. That doesn't mean that the person who's trying to sell you stuff is your predator, but what it means is it's trying to use the same mechanism that you use to pick one thing out of a lineup because they
Right.
want to be that one thing when you're going to buy something.
Right.
So think about that like psychologically. It seems like it's the
Mm.
same mechanism that
Yeah.
you use for your fear response, but it's used for sales.
Very smart, right? In a way. But because you've done this and you met whatever 2,000 media interviews, there's a secret sauce in business and life. That if you distilled it, what would you say that is?
I listen, I wouldn't say that I have the answers to everything in life, but
Sure.
I would say that uh what I try to tell people, at least when it comes to marketing or PR, um, everybody wants growth. All living things want to grow. In fact, that's what we call life, right? If we see
Right.
a plant that's growing, it's alive. If we see a plant that's shrinking, what do we say? It's dying, right?
Right.
Your
Right.
battery is growing, it's alive. If the battery is shrinking, what do you say? Like the power is shrinking, it's dying, right? So
Right. Right.
we equate shrinking or getting smaller to death. We believe as we get older, as time goes on, our lives are supposed to get better. We're supposed to have a better career and everything. When we don't, that's where we get these quarter life crisis and midlife crises and everything if we're not quite where we think we should be. Um, so everybody wants to grow. So if you really want to succeed, instead of thinking of how can I grow, think of what can I do that'll help somebody else grow, that'll help somebody else get bigger, get more powerful, get what they want, and frankly, just figure out how to give it to them, and then you'll be able to name your price, right? So
Yeah.
so you don't go to a customer and say, you need this. I'm going to convince you that you need this product, and then I'm going to convince you that this is the best version of it out there. No, you go to people who already want to grow, already want to be better, and are willing to pay for it, and they have a problem, and you go, okay, here's how I can solve that problem. And whatever that is the fundamental key of business. Every product, every service that is legitimate. That's not just hype or fashion or some cool thing. But you could say culture, fashion, entertainment, they help you grow too. They help you live a more fulfilling life too. So, depending on how you look at it. But that's really what it is. Help enough people grow and live a better life, and then you'll be able to name your price.
Absolutely. That's my money right there. Is just the joy of seeing the person, when they grow, and
Hmm.
it's so fulfilling.
Hmm.
And I can take it with me wherever I go.
The only other option would be that is the zero sum game, like stock market or some other areas like crypto in some cases, like where when you succeed, somebody else has failed, right?
Mm,
Gambling, right?
yeah.
Poker or something.
Yeah.
So the idea, a lot of people see the world like that. Like if I'm going to get
Yes.
ahead, somebody
Yes.
else has to get behind.
I
So they
hate
think they
that.
have to be ruthless. They think they have to be mean. And I'm not going to say yes, sometimes those people win, but it's not a game that I want to play.
It's not.
There's two games being played. One's the more creative, and one's the competitive one. And I want to play the creative one, and
Exactly.
find a way to
Exactly.
help other people solve their problems and get paid for it.
That's it right there. That's living joy for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, if you could share today with the listeners, what's one something they could do today that would allow them to learn, to lead, to help people?
I'd have to say the single greatest thing you could do, in my opinion, is to start every day with some type of meditation. Now, a lot of people say mindfulness because I think they're afraid of the word meditation. But really what it is stop looking outside of yourself. Stop looking at your phone, right?
Right.
And look inside.
Yes.
And a lot of people are afraid to do that because they're afraid of what they're going to see, what they're going to discover. But that stuff, if you let it sit, it only festers and gets worse. So take a moment every day to look inside and
Yes.
also to mentally look where you want to go. Live a life. Greatest philosopher, I think, in the entire 20th century. You want to know who it is? You'll never guess.
Okay.
I think it's Dolly Parton. I
Okay.
think of all the people, Dolly Parton, she said one line that beats every philosopher. I've read Nietzsche, I've read Aristotle, I've read Lao Tzu and Sun Tzu, everybody, all the Tzus. But Dolly Parton said, figure out who you are and then do it on purpose. And I was just
Cool.
like, holy crap,
Oh,
that
yeah.
sums up. That's everything you need. Just
Yeah.
find out who you are, not what other people think you are, but that is a journey right there. Find out
Yeah.
who you are and then do it on purpose. Don't do it by accident. Don't be somebody else's version of you. Be on purpose. And that's probably the best way to approach life and success and everything. Because the thing is, if I start a business and let's say I fail at that business. Well, if I started it and I honestly thought it was going to succeed and I tried my best and I failed, there's at least some virtue in that. I feel good about myself
Hmm.
from there, right? But
Right.
if I start a business because I think it's the next hot thing or I think other people are going to be impressed with me and everything and then I fail, right?
Mm.
Then I'm like, gee, I wonder what would have happened if I would have done the thing I wanted to do, right? If I would have
Yeah.
done my thing. So as long as you're living everybody else's dream, you'll never discover and you'll have so many regrets because it's better to try your way and fail at it because then at least you don't have that regret of like, oh,
Yeah.
I spent all this time living someone else's dream and
Exactly.
I sucked at it. What if I would have spent this time working on my own?
Right. And that no regrets. You don't want any for sure.
Yeah.
I bet you've got some great stories. Just one media moment that changed the game for you and what the listeners could learn or how you
Um,
approach the moment.
sure. Well, I was on Steve Harvey's show. And Steve, a lot of people joke about him, but he
Yeah.
was a great
Yeah.
great guy. He's a great guy.
Yeah. He is a good
He
guy.
is. I shouldn't speak in the
I,
past tense.
yeah.
So we were off the air. Cameras weren't even on, right? And he just like the his staff idolized him. And I thought, how
Yeah.
many people are sucking up to this job? Like, how many little sycophants did this guy hire, right? But then when I meet the guy, he's just talking like just off the top of his head, and it is like wisdom, right?
Mm,
So he was just talking to the audience. Cameras weren't even on. This is beforehand, just off the top of his head. And somebody asked him about money, right?
mm,
And he said, well, I give away a lot of money. Like, yeah, I'm making a lot of money now. I grew up, poor and I didn't have anything, and now I have a lot, and now I give it away. But you know what? One thing I learned about people who are wealthy, and I'm kind of paraphrasing his phrase here, is when you make more money, it doesn't change who you are. It just makes you more of whatever you already are.
exactly.
So if you're an asshole, you're gonna become more of an asshole, right?
Right.
If you're a
Yeah.
nice person, you become more of a nice person. And money just gives you the power to be who you really are. So
Yeah.
believe them when somebody wealthy does something terrible. They're a terrible person. And believe it also when somebody wealthy does something great, because they don't need to do that. They don't need that, you know?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so he just wanted to make a bunch of money and then give it away. That was his thing, and he's been very charitable if you
Yeah.
look it up. And so, but it was just like that was just, and then the cameras started up, and then we did a show about
Mhm.
like honeydews and Valentine's Day and like stuff like that, and just like I was just like, why was nobody recording that? That was some brilliant stuff.
Right.
So that was one of the people that I bet like he's just had so much wisdom, and he has like radio show, he has TV show, he had all this stuff. And he still had more to give.
That's
So
so
very wise guy.
beautiful. So inspiring. And
Yeah.
I'm living my legacy now. Just that, just living the legacy now instead of waiting, to leave something behind. Let's leave it behind now. And what kind of legacy are you leaving behind as you're moving forward in your brain hacker super brain system you got?
I don't know. I think
It's
that's not for
honest.
me to decide. I think it's for others to decide. But I don't plan on dying. I think I'm just going to figure out how to live forever. I think I'm going to work
I
on
think
that.
we do. I
Yeah.
refuse to believe this death thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of when you mention that.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, it is. And when you mention that word grief, because I've
Hmm.
just had a year of that myself,
Oh my
and I
God.
realized that nobody talks about it and everybody's all, you know, keeps it
Mhm.
inside and nobody knows how to process through it.
Yeah.
Right. But it
And
really,
the irony is that it's touched everyone.
yeah,
And or if it
exactly.
hasn't, it will. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Like for some
Yeah.
reason, we think we're the only one going through it. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's this great parable, Buddhist parable of the mustard seed. It
Hmm.
was like basically this woman who just lost her child, her son.
Yeah.
He was in like a tragic accident. He was like 10 years old or something. And she goes to the Buddha, and which the Buddha, everybody thinks Buddha has like magic powers at this point, right? Because he's
Mhm.
like this guru, right? And she
Right.
goes, "Can you bring my son back to life?" And he thinks for a moment, instead of saying, well, no, that's not really what I do. I meditate and people achieve enlightenment and stuff. He goes, you know what? Yeah, I can do this, but I'm going to need something from you. I'm going to need a mustard seed from a house that has not touched death.
Mm.
And she starts going around from house to house to house and asks them, has death touched this house? Has death touched this house? And in every single case, the answer was yes. And she heard story after story of people who lost loved ones, whether it be their, parents and children, spouses, and things like that. And then she goes back to the Buddha and says, "Thank you very much. That's exactly what I needed. I needed to know that I was not alone in this, that this is the human condition." It's a
Mm.
very famous story because that enlightenment comes from your own journey
Yeah.
and,
That's
and to
really
know that you're
cool.
not alone. You're not the only one dealing whatever it is you're dealing with. You're not the only one dealing with it. If anything, it's obscenely common. If
Yeah.
you're dealing with something, if you're struggling with something very, very bad, you are one speck in an ocean of people who have experienced the same thing. And the minute you realize that, and I'm not saying it to diminish whatever you might be feeling, but the minute you realize that, you're not alone, and you're not special, but in a good way, that
Right.
everyone deals with grief. This is the human
Right.
condition. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't. There's nothing.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm swearing so much. Is this loud?
Well, we're there. It's okay.
All right.
I mean,
I'm used to the
we're
YouTube rules where you could swear, but you can't say, you can't say
certain.
some things, but
Right.
not swear words.
Right. Right. Well, you're
You have to
in
say
your
things like unalive instead of
right.
death and stuff.
Yeah, I like to be real, okay? And I
Good.
probably and we'll edit it out. Sorry for whoever's offended. I mean, I
Feel
just
free
let
to.
my guests usually, unless they start saying GD or something
Yeah.
creepy, profane or whatever. But
Fair
I
enough.
feel your heart and I know you went through some, we won't have to talk about that today because I'm sure you have some new key around to rise above that. But I wanted to talk about your brain hacker book and then tell everybody how to get in touch with you and get your book too.
Yeah. So, Brain Hacker. It's available everywhere books are, right? Amazon,
Yeah.
everywhere else.
Yeah.
And this has about 55 different hacks, everything from memory and speed reading all the way to how to stick to your diet and lose weight and sleep better and stuff like that. But I actually expanded it even more. We have a website called brainhackers.com where there are articles from a bunch of different experts that are on everything from money, memory, as well as things like positive thinking, like things like sleep and relationships and all sorts of things. So a brain hack is basically just a modern term for self-help. Think about things differently, and it's something I want to encourage everybody to do. That you might not realize it, but the thoughts that you decide to think can change the course and quality of your life. In fact, it's the only thing that really does. Time and time again, you have the control over it. You just have to take control over it and do it. And don't think, oh, I was just born this way or I was raised this way and I can't do anything different. That's not the case.
Right. Absolutely. That should be encouraging. And it's just been so fun to talk to you. I could keep going here, Dave. No, for,
Pleasure.
for sure. And I have one more question I was just thinking of. There's a lot of brain hacking things out there. What is your opinion of, the freak healing with sound and the frequencies that a lot of these doctors have out that are supposed to do different things? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of body of evidence based around brain entrainment.
Okay.
Dr. Porter did that really well with his app Brain Tap.
Brain tap.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's a number of other, I'm sure, another number of other
Right.
applications. But yeah, the idea is that our brain responds to things really well. I mean, probably the
Yeah.
best example is why we fall asleep to the sound of rain or nature.
Yeah.
Right? Why do we do that, right? Well, it's because we've spent, something like 300,000 years in nature falling asleep, right? So our brain is geared towards that, and falling asleep to the sound of, television streaming or something does not give us the best quality sleep. It's
Right.
it's it's not that there's some magic to it or something. It's just
Yeah.
your brain does what uh, it has historically done for so long. And when you
Right.
understand that that's what your brain wants, what your brain cares for and craves, then it all these things don't become a mystery anymore.
Right. Your operating system.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So yeah, so sometimes, I mean, I don't know about every situation. I've heard a lot of like this frequency is the God frequency and stuff. I don't know about that,
Right.
but or the brown note as well from like
Yeah.
South Park. But no, but there is definitely like sounds in the background makes a difference, and and
Hmm.
and the environment that you allow yourself to have. If you constantly have distractions playing, you're going to be a distracted person, right?
Right. Right.
But take a moment and just listen to the silence and
Yes.
go inside.
Exactly. Listen. That was actually the first word that I heard from the spirit, which was I don't even know if I was 3 years old or something, was listen. Okay.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Dave, it's an honor and pleasure to be with you again. And it's always so fun. And we'll look forward to more. Thank you so much for showing up here.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Wow, what a ride. Today we learned that memory isn't just a skill, it's a superpower. And with love, intention, and a little science, we can train our brains to serve our higher purpose. Dave, thank you for not just sharing your genius, but for embodying what it means to use your gifts to empower others. To our beautiful listeners, you are capable of more than you know. So take what you heard today and ask yourself, what if your mind became your greatest ally? What would you do then? Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and remember, you were born for such a time as this. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithkrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.
The power of purpose. Doing well by doing good. The power of purpose. Doing well by doing good. The power